Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn Hot Seat. This is Ladek once again coming to you from OpenLMS. Again, as we have been doing over the past couple of weeks, we are super excited to, you see on your screen right there, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the recording of it, we're super excited to be having our first in-person event in the history of our company, really, honestly. That's actually the truth. Our company has been a virtual company that started about 2 weeks before the pandemic did. And so we're just actually starting to meet some of our colleagues this year, which is really exciting. And we want to meet our clients. We want to meet people in this audience. We want to meet, everyone. And so we want to invite you to come to Phoenix, Arizona, the 18th to the 20th of October this year for Innovation 2022. It should be a lot of fun. I mean, I love doing the virtual summits that we do through the eLearn Success Series, but there's nothing quite like meeting people in person. That said, I am excited today to have another guest here for the eLearn Hot Seat, David James. How are you, David?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, delighted to be on the show.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic to have you. David, you are the Chief Learning Officer at 360 Learning. We've been lucky enough to have one of your other colleagues, Jonas, in the summit actually last year, where we talked about collaborative learning, which is really exciting. And so I'm really excited to kind of continue that conversation and learn where 360 Learning is today, and also talk about what you're passionate about, which is data, which is the L&D profession itself, and where we're going with things. And I see that you have a guitar in the background.
I do. Yes.
I feel like we all play the guitar at the end of the day. I need to put one in the back here because I too am a guitar player. As I do with everyone though, David, why don't I want to just sort of step aside real quick, give you the 30-60 seconds of who is David James, and sort of give us your background and what you're doing at 360.
Yeah, fabulous. So I've been in learning and development for the best part of 25 years. I started in the late 1990s as a trainer. I was fortunate to have an opportunity to grow my skills as I grew a function as in a standalone role. I advocate you can have an enormous amount of fun when the reins are off, and you can build something that wasn't there before, but I felt then as if I really need to test myself, and so I joined a larger learning and development team. So my whole career to that point was in finance and banking in London, but I fancied a change when somebody approached me and asked me whether I'd like to join Disney on a short-term contract. I took the risk and I thought, okay, let's give it a go. And 8 years later, I was running learning, talent, and organizational development for Disney across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So it's funny how a 3-month assignment can turn into an 8-year career. And I decided to get out before I became a lifer.
I was just going to say, I have to interrupt you there because I have met some of the Disney lifers in Florida and California. It is I'm not going to use the C word, but it can get very serious about people who are lifers at Disney. It's amazing that universe so anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I know people who've got their I mean, you get
tattoos. You got to get your tattoos, man.
Well, you get a pin for being there 5 years. I think you get a slightly larger pin for 10 years. But I know people who have got their 25-year trophy. It really is a place where people go there and stay. It's quite a lure. And I'd say that during that time was I joined in 2006 and left in 2014. And to say that the entire business model was turned upside down isn't an understatement. When I joined in 2006, home entertainment, which was box sets and DVDs, was the most profitable division in the company. It wouldn't surprise you if I told you that box sets and DVDs became the least profitable division when I left in 2014, and everything between that was also shaking up, driven by changing consumer demands. So their need for learning and development during that time was extraordinary as the business model and functions stretched and changed, integrated and decentralized. We were a team in demand. But I left there, as I said, in 2014, and I left there frustrated, if I'm absolutely honest, because I spent the best part of a decade trying to push technology onto people without it actually working, and I thought we can't do learning and development for thousands of people without smart or useful technology. And a large proportion of my time, if not a disproportionate amount of time, was spent trying to drive traffic towards platforms and content that people just would not go to. So I thought that there was an opportunity outside, because, tell me if I'm wrong, we go to Google and YouTube when we need help. I mean, there's no reticence to use technology, but people are smart and people are intolerant of things that they think are going to waste their time. So I left there to try to bridge that gap between people and technology, and that's what I would first of all did at Loop, and what I do now in 360.
Fantastic. So I want you to take me down there. So when you say you put technology on the table, is it devices? Is it, standalone courses? Is it, trying to find learning on demand? Like, what's been the evolution there, and like, where do you stand today in terms of technology? Because it almost sounds like at the end there, like you kind of said, hey, look, platform not necessary. We've got Google, we've got Facebook, we've got YouTube. Maybe it's let's support the learner rather than build a platform for them. What do you like? But maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah. So my ethos here is that first of all, Google and YouTube are great, and I couldn't do nearly all of the home renovations that I've done without them. But they know nothing about my company, and they know nothing about any company that I've ever worked with. I'm a firm believer that at least 90% of the development required in organizations is linked to culture. Everything that emanates from how do we do things around here. And I think that that's absolutely core. But, it's really difficult to sell. So the market don't sell it. And I also think that that cracking learning technology is really easy. That when you're adding bribes to existing content, you've already lost. People are smarter than that. But if
give me an example of that, what's bribes to existing content? What does that mean?
Gamification, leaderboards. It is new and novel delivery mechanisms that try to lure people in through it being novel rather than it being useful, because we believe that if we have 10 million pieces of content within and when I say we, learning and development, if we have 10 million pieces of content and we have 100,000 learners, then there must be something for everybody, right? We bet the house on that. We spend our budgets on it. But the only problem is that it doesn't speak to roles, departments, culture. It doesn't speak to customers, clients, stakeholders, norms and practice. It doesn't speak to roles. It just speaks to education. And so we spend budgets on these big bets that employees themselves are largely apathetic to. But what it comes down to it is, so I am a huge believer of technology, and I believe that we all are all capable of a great deal more because of it. But instead of the bribes, what I believe it comes down to, and my track record of this over the last decade has shown, is that if you help people with what they need in the context of what they're actually doing when they need it, bingo. They engage. And then the conversation isn't then about how do you get people to engage in learning technology. It's now that we've got them, how do we help them to do the things the organization needs them to do? And then you can do that at scale. But if you don't seek to understand what it is that people are trying to do and what they're not able to do without your help, then you can't help them. And everything else is a big bet. And I mean a bet, because you're trying to rely on pretty platforms full of engaging content, but that engagement isn't what's actually required. It's the useful stuff they need when they need it. And when you break it down, first of all, what I'd say is that's really hard to sell. But learning and development people who get it are doing this, and they're doing this cheaper, faster, and more effectively than the people who perhaps are behind the curve a little.
I love that there's so much to unpack there, because the first thing that you think of as an L&D professional when you put that statement on the table is that, what role do I have? But it in my mind, as my mind, it always looks at that like, wow, the opportunity for somebody who is an L&D professional or who's a learning professional this is an even greater opportunity than before. Because before it was like, how do I find that giant volume of stuff that I put on the table, that I put in that platform? Now this is like, how do I get specialized? How do I, meet those learners with what they want, when they want it? Would you agree that this is actually even almost a meatier opportunity than what they had before?
I think this is a greater opportunity, yeah, because I think that that for too long we've been stuck in administration and delivery mode, and whilst we've been hamstrung by so much administration. I mean, I think the most dystopian job title in our profession is LMS administrator. I mean, what a job! You work for this dumb computer. I mean, that's what it is. It's so dumb. It needs people working for it. But I'm hoping we're seeing the end of those days, because smart technology should be eradicating the administration and elevating the status of learning and development. And that's what I am actually seeing. But I think the absolute critical part of this, it's not about the creation of content. It's about understanding what the needs are. And data and evidence-based practice has already revolutionized other job roles and other job functions. And I think it's landing in learning and development and revolutionizing our impact.
So now, I know this is an area that you wanted to speak about today. We had talked about this in the green room. Tell me about what data and evidence-based practices look like to you from the L&D perspective, because I think many people listening right now, many of our colleagues are going to say, look, I've got the data from my LMS. I've got the data from, I've got the clicks, I've got the time, time viewed of the video. I've got the completion rates, those kinds of things. What does it mean to you, and how do we evolve it and use it to our advantage?
Okay, so what you're describing there is the post-mortem. It is, okay, the patient's dead, right? So what did it die of, right? But if you actually if you engage in the right conversations at the outset, the patient need not die. So in data and evidence-based practice, first of all, it's recognizing and understanding critical points of failure in your organization's operation. And the evidence is simply seeking to understand from the perspective of the people we're expecting to influence what they're trying to do and what they're not able to do efficiently. Now, this replaces the learning needs analysis. The learning needs analysis is dead. There's no point in doing it anymore. It was a resource allocation exercise because learning and development used to take so much time and cost so much money. It doesn't anymore. And if it is the way you're doing it wrong. So the data and evidence-based practice is taking the same requests from the same stakeholders, the ones that say, hey, could I have some training? And instead of saying, yeah, what would you like in the training? Or who would you like on the training? Or when would you like the training? It's saying, what is it you're hoping to achieve with the training? What's not working now that needs to work better? What's the cost of doing nothing? Right? So you're having a big conversation only about the things that your stakeholder should be invested in. So if this is a true need, then your data is the very next question. It's the killer question. Brilliant. Show me. Right? If this is such a big deal, show me. Show me you're missing those SLAs. Show me that that we're losing good people. Show me that we're hemorrhaging customers. Show me how this is actually a critical point of failure. So you'll get the data. That data might be over a long window or a short window, but you want to drill down into it to find out what that's actually telling you.
Let me just interrupt you real quickly there. Who is responsible for showing you that? You're saying the learner is coming up and saying,
no,
look, I'm missing SLAs every week and I'm unable to answer tickets and I'm this and that, or is this now the meat of the L&D expertise is saying, I'm not who's responsible for showing me?
Good question, because what I'm not saying here is this is an upside down granular learning needs analysis where it's a free for all needs analysis. It's really not that. This is your stakeholders, your business heads, your leadership, the people who are asking for your help, who are asking for your help now, the ones who say, look, I could do with some training for my first line managers. These are the people. So you would have been engaging in a learning conversation with them before, but this time you're only interested in what those people are accountable for and the results that they're not getting right now. So you've got to move past the training request. And the way that you do that is you say yes. So You say, Stephen, can I have some training for my first line managers? The answer is yes, absolutely. Right. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, what is it that you're hoping to achieve with this? Right, there are going to be so many curveballs. This is, I mean, because people are used to getting the training they ask for. The only problem is that training rarely led to significant difference in the way people worked and the results they got. And the reason is that you can't possibly affect the work if you don't know what they do. Otherwise, you know, we're relying too much on luck, hope, and osmosis. I'm afraid I'm not a believer. I'm not superstitious. So I believe that you can't affect the work unless you understand the work. So what we want to do is we want to find out what is it that these people are expected to do that they're not able to do. What is the cost of doing nothing here? So we want to get right down into the very reason, the genesis of the thought that these people needed help. 80% of the time, leaders and managers have got where they are for a good reason. They're savvy, they're smart. You can talk to them on their level, and you can get past the training request to the actual reason they engaged in the conversation. 20%, forget it. They just want the training. The way I describe it, Stephen, is that I've got an 8-year-old daughter. If she falls over and she bruises her leg, she'll ask for a plaster. I take a look at that and I say, it's not bleeding. And I know she just wants a plaster to make her feel better. And I give her the plaster. 20% of stakeholders will say, I want training for my middle managers. And you'll go, what's the outcome you're looking for? I go, no. I want training for middle managers. And then so you go to your first aid kit, you get a plaster out, but you go for the cheapest, easiest one you can apply because you know it doesn't matter because it's a non-problem. And you just want people to feel better. But if you've got a stakeholder and there is a critical point of failure in their operation that they need your help with, then they'll engage in that conversation. So you've got your data. And then what you want to do is you want to take that data for the people who are responsible for it and accountable for it. These would have been your attendees. These would have been the people that you said at the end of your training course, nothing will change if you don't apply what you've learned today. What will be the one thing you've learned from this 5-day course that you're going to look to apply? Like, seriously, we used to say that stuff. But so what you're doing is you're showing them the data that they're accountable for, and you're saying, so things aren't working out the way that they're expected to, but luckily I'm here to help. I need to know what you're trying to do when you're doing this work and what you're not able to do efficiently or effectively right now. Like, let's talk about all of this.
I got this is awesome. I love this conversation. So, but I've two things that I want to talk to you real quick. One is that 20% that need the plaster, right? Haven't you just identified a cancer? You know, haven't you just identified, you know, sort of a part of your organization that is just cogs? And do you want that? Maybe your organization needs cogs. I don't know. But like, have in your experience over the last 10 years, are these people that we finally, you know, that we maybe have just identified that maybe need to matriculate out and, you know, we need to find a way to, you know, bring in, you know, some fresh blood there? Or do I have that wrong? Like every business kind of needs that. Maybe they're a glue or something that holds the organization together.
That's a really good question. And some of those people are perhaps should be moved on because they're just greasing the wheels instead of having the tricky conversations or actually managing. They're palming it off onto L&D. But I can also tell you from my experience of actually being in L&D, sometimes that's your CFO. The CFO's already sold training. So by the time they get to you and say, I want training, they've already sold it to the people that they want to attend it. So when you say, what are those outcomes? They're already looking and thinking, oh, no. I think what you're trying to do is consult. I just want you to deliver. And I've had that. I've had those conversations. And some people just won't be moved. And there are too many people in learning and development because we can't demonstrate our value. We don't have a lot of currency in the organization or influence to say, hey, Bob over there, he needs to be cut adrift because he's not adding the value. We don't have that currency. We develop that currency if we're affecting the work and we're doing that in a predictable and reliable way.
I was just going to say, you got to take us there because, is that a part of the data conversation that you're saying? So this takes me to the second question, where if we're showing up to that conversation saying, look, show me what you want to affect, like what's going wrong and what, you know, how do we want to affect it? It almost sounds to me like the L&D professional, the real job, and maybe it's always been this, is just facilitating the move, facilitating the behavior change, right? And I'm saying that in the most generous way possible, because you and I mean, I'm not, I don't know anything about fixing engines, or I don't know anything about fixing, the customer service protocols for my company. But if you tell me there's a problem, I can facilitate the problem that you see, and you probably already know the solution, but we just got to get you there. Do I have that right, or am I missing the boat on that one?
Yeah, that's a part of the puzzle. That really is, and that leads us to the collaborative element of collaborative learning. That if we know what the problem is, then we can all work together in order to solve it. So, but the beauty of this approach is that you're right next to your stakeholder. You've had a conversation with data. Between you and your stakeholder, you realize what the problem is. The data tells you. So what you're doing is then you go to the people who are accountable for the work with your stakeholder, and then you uncover that. And then what's going to come out is, as you said, it's not going to be learning. There's going to be stuff around processes. There are going to be systems. There's going to be a technical element. It could be relationships. There could be communication. All of these things. But unless you have the conversation about what it could be, you can't get there. So there'll be certain parts, and it doesn't take a bold L&D person to be going, process, that's not me. Systems. But again, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to be the L&D person, like going, oh yeah, I'll take that. I mean, how little credibility or confidence do you have in yourself to think that you are the order taker with all of that? But what I'm saying is that this data and evidence-based practice truly unpacks what's actually going on, and then who's responsible for that is a different matter. But if you're right next to your stakeholder, who you've built more trust with because you're interested in talking about solving the real problems, then you are further down the line, and then you've got that collaborative element. So if you've got so if you think that you're a facilitator who's going to help to connect with the right the people responsible for the work with the right expertise in order to increase their capability, then the rest of this is just a collaborative exercise as well. But again, don't take on more than you should. Your stakeholder doesn't expect you to be taking on all of this stuff. They expect you to be representing learning and development, and to be working on the knowledge gaps and the skills gaps to increase the capability. So I'd say to people, back yourself, and don't think you're going to be taking on IT's job by being in the room and systems.
Where does this potentially go wrong? And where has it, where does it need a strong hand to guide the process or set a direction? Because I can see, many times decision by committee, decision by, a group can sometimes go awry and may not ultimately fit, especially in this case, the needs of the business or the direction of the business. Maybe, the board has said, look, we're moving out of this service business and we're moving in this direction. Like, talk to me about that. Where can it go wrong? What are the real challenges of getting people to recognize what's wrong and then collaboratively coming up with a solution?
Right. So I think that there's not a lot of risk when you're talking with people about the job that they're accountable for and they're expected to do. So I'd say that in that regard, there's no risk. But what I think you've highlighted there is that if there is a fundamental shift in the way the work is going to be done in order to deliver the same results or different results, then this is a different conversation with your stakeholder who says, look, I'd like some training. What would you like some training on? Right. So we need to train people. A great example is if you what happened to marketing in the last 15 years? We'd like to train our marketers to be digital marketers. You'll have a look and go, well, that's a fundamentally different job. You wouldn't train that. You'd create mini accelerated apprenticeships, and you'd look to seed and amplify a pocket of expertise and know-how and make that more broadly applicable. Perhaps you would do some kind of assessment first to understand where people actually are, and then plug them into the resources that are going to help them to guide and support them to do more of the right stuff. So you make a good point. When things are going to change, then it's a different conversation. But if you're looking to improve the way things are, which is, I'd say it's about 70% of learning and development training requests, then data and evidence will help you to zero in on what the actual problems are or the critical points of failure are in the way that people are working, and highlight to the people who are responsible for the work, because you're not asking them what they will need to be trained on. You're asking them what, like in the context of what they're doing, what they need in order to get that figure upwards. And you've got this stakeholder in the room. So if you've got a room full of people going, well, this is account's fault, and it's their fault, and it's their fault. You got a stakeholder going, is any of this your responsibility? So there is a risk of finger pointing, but generally this comes down to your data's not lying. If you are responsible for those numbers and we've got the right people in the room, there is going to be a conversation around, we don't have this information or this capability, and that's where you can step in. But as for the conversation, I'd say there's next to no risk. What you got to think is, what are we up against here? We are up against taking huge assumptions, so aggregating learning needs out of secondhand information. So people who aren't doing the job, managers and leaders, aggregating those up to a higher level of abstraction, and then delivering down standardized programs that don't speak to the context in which they work. I'd say the way we've been doing learning and development for 25 years is the riskiest you can do it. If you want to then pivot the conversation to what it is that people are actually doing, you're increasing your chances of hitting the mark, of zeroing in on making the actual difference required. So data and evidence-based practice and these conversations decrease the risk, because what we're doing right now, investing in platforms and programs. There's a report that was published in 2016 called The Great Training Robbery, which it talks then of, I think it was $162 million of spend on training, which Nick Shackleton-Jones then equated in his book, How People Learn, I think to $300 billion of training a year, right? So there's a huge amount of money. In this report, The Great Training Robbery, it states that only 10% of training spend can be equated to demonstrable impact.
Wow.
Right? You do those maths and you realize that there is $260 billion of waste. And a lot of this is going to be because people make big bets on solutions and they don't know the problems. I'd say that data and evidence-based practice will start to rectify a lot of the challenges that we've had in this profession.
Okay, so tough question.
Yeah.
I'm going to move. So I'm going to start the question by moving outside the L&D universe for a second, because I've been a consultant. That was my life for a long, long time. And I can't tell you the number of times that I went to one of my clients and I said, look, what we don't need is a meeting with 20 people here.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to fly a whole bunch of people in, and we're going to spend 2 days in a room, and we're going to talk. And just the burn rate of the people hours is going to be $500,000. Right. Just the burn rate on the salaries. Right. And then you're telling me I've got budget issues and this kind of thing. Like, how much is it that we don't want to hear, or we don't want to take the uncomfortable choices of? This kind of goes back to that 20% of people, right? The uncomfortable choices of you actually have to change the behavior, right? Or, hey, guess what? That your kind of normal work pattern that you've been going through every day that you're used to, and you got that, your kind of comfortable life and whatnot. We're going to have to change that and break that. And so people resist that. So how much of this is making tough decisions and doing that in a way that is respectful, but look, we're trying to go that way, and where we need to go that way. Do you understand what I'm asking here? Like,
yeah.
This is the, like, you're talking about $260 billion of wasted training. That just sounds like a lot of leaders that weren't willing to do the hard work or take the tough decision. And I don't want to be so grand as to, I'm on high here and making that, but I've seen it. So what's your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. So remember, I spent 15 years in-house speaking to vendors. I'd take vendors to stakeholders and say, so I used to brief vendors on the way up to the meeting and say, look, we might not get a lot of time here. What we've got to think about is a gold, silver, and bronze solution. So the gold solution includes all the analysis, but I know that there is a reluctance towards analysis, and so you might want to offer the silver and the bronze, and then you hope they go for the middle, which is a modicum of analysis. But Guy Wallace, who I consider a friend and a mentor, he's been doing this stuff since 1979. And he says analysis is one of the hardest things that you'll get through the door. So sometimes you need to do it. without calling it so. I mean, he'd laugh because I'd call sessions of analysis discovery, thinking that it was softer somehow, and you might just open the door. But I'd say that in the way that I've been describing it here, it's, first of all, I think we're in the zeitgeist. I think that so much more business is done with data. And I think that if we can, and I'm speaking here predominantly to in-house L&D, because I'm afraid that us vendors on the outside will always get parts of briefs. That's never, ever going to change. But if you're in-house and you're having that conversation and your stakeholder says, I'd like some training for my middle managers, that's our opportunity. If we say, if we want to have a training conversation there, we will miss the boat. But if we want to have that, just instead of, if we say, yes, I'd love to help, could you tell me what you'd like to achieve? I think that we are not too far, and they can help every vendor that comes in through the door. But if we simply take the request and we look for the best fit vendor with the best fit solution, we will continue to miss the mark and make just a small amount of impact, and we will deliver what was asked. But will we make the impact? Well, we can't, because we didn't explore what the impact was. We ended up trying to develop skills without actually discussing what those skills were meant to impact.
Where, in your opinion, since you've been looking at this forever, and I love the examples that you have, the experience that you bring to the table, where are we going to see, or how can we affect that tectonic shift, right? That those plates, because I'm going to characterize it in this way. We live in an era of data. We live in an era of analysis. We live in an era where if you were to walk into a room and be like, "Yeah, we do business by the gut. We don't really look at the data," you would get laughed out of the room, right? Yeah. And yet, you just said 2 minutes ago, you're like, look, people, you would walk vendors in and be like, look, we're not going to put analysis on the table. We're not going to, in other words, you're saying we're not really going to look at the data. We're not really going to give the actual answer, right? That people want to hear. That's akin to somebody saying, I've often, my mind often goes back to this, where if you were to walk into a dinner party tomorrow, and just, you were just be sitting across, and, you were talking with the person next to you, and you guys were talking about finance or something, and say, hey, you know what, math, that's not my, I've never been really good with the numbers. You guys would have a joke, right? You guys would have a little laugh about it, and everybody would be like, oh, of course. Yeah. But if somebody were to tell you about, hey, I didn't read that book because I can't read, right? You would be like, oh, you can't read, right? I feel like this is the kind of conversation that we're having right now in the data world, where we're almost giving lip service to data, to analysis, because it's the words that we're supposed to say. It's the image that we're supposed to project. We're collecting lots of data, but how do we make that cultural shift to saying, I can be comfortable with this. I can do this. This is not something this is something that's very knowable. I'm not sure if I couched that question correctly, but how do we make that shift so that even Sally on the front line feels comfortable saying, you know what, I know the numbers, I know how they work?
That's a really good question, and I'd say that we do that by not starting with the numbers. That to make that shift, we've got to remember what the numbers are for, right? We've got to make sure we're working on the right stuff, because by working on the wrong stuff, we can spend an enormous amount of money. We've been talking the enormous amount of money on stuff that just can't meet the mark. So remember, we're not forging any new interactions with our stakeholders. We are just taking it down a different path with our stakeholders. And the role of data in this is just to validate whether this is actually a thing, and to what extent it's a thing, and who is actually responsible. So all we're doing, so this comes along, that the whole middle manager thing. I need some training for my middle managers. What is it that they are not doing right now? Well, I don't believe, first of all, so you could say that the ones that have been here longest seem to be blocking the path for good, talented people. Okay, what's the impact of that? We're losing talented people, right? Can I see the data, right? So what we're doing is we're saying, I just need to see what is actually going on. Now, I don't think it takes too much of a leap to know where to get that data. Right, so you would then say, right, could you just get me a list of those middle managers? I'll run it past HRIS, the HR systems team, who'll show me who's leaving, what percentage of their teams those are, a little bit of their status, some of the important stuff. What was their performance rating? What was their tenure within the organization? Did we have a plan for them? Is this actually a problem with the middle managers? So you can see that all you need to do, and there was this brilliant article in Harvard called How to Think Like a Data Scientist. And really, this is just the application of that. There is an assumption. There's a broad assumption. You need to ask yourself the question, what would I see for this to be true? What would I be seeing if this weren't true? So these middle managers, I'm having a look and I'm seeing there's absolutely no churn. I've just got disgruntled people who have the ear of my stakeholder thinking, like, this is a different problem. But what would you actually like to do? So this is where it actually starts. This will stop learning and development spending a great deal of money and wasting their time on, because you just imagine that I'd taken that training request and now I'm down the path of a vendor. The vendor then brings their analysis team in and goes, this could be anything. I'm pitching you a 5-day course, a 3-day course, or a 2-day course, right? Okay, so let's go for the 3-day. Let's go for the silver. What can we fit in there? Right. So what we do is we crowbar in topics into a program that can't possibly hit the mark, because we don't even know whether this is a problem or not. And it could be, I mean, this is the tough one, it could be the stakeholder that's the problem. They've not designed an org where there's anywhere for people to go. And so what they want to do is they want to increase the capability of the middle management to try to craft some kind of satisfaction from nowhere. It's like knitting without wool. And but you don't know unless you go down that path. And so this is why I'd say that data and evidence is absolutely critical, but it doesn't start into your analogy when, you don't open a book when you can't read and then sort of fumble your way through and then go, well, I don't like books. What you do is you have the conversations to understand what the assumptions are. You determine how you would prove or disprove that would be the case. And then you just lean on. I mean, as I said, all of the data I've just stated would be one visit to the HR systems team. Just one visit with all of those questions, and that's it. But you start with an assumption, and then what you believe would prove or disprove that assumption. And I think that is accessible.
So take me there. I think many people who are going to be listening to this, part of what's in their head is that this sounds like a lot of work. This sounds like a lot of time, a lot of investment, which at the end of the day, if you're getting a better result, okay, let's do it. But what am I looking at when I'm looking at a collaborative solution? Again, it's kind of a stupid question. Do I care? Hey, if it gets me where I want to go, then that's what I should do. But what's the different time investment for an L&D professional doing it the collaborative way?
Okay, so doing it this way, if you've got so you're speaking to stakeholder and getting the data from HR systems, and then bringing the people responsible for the work together for an exploration session, that could take you up to 2 weeks, and that's mainly to get into people's diaries. The conversation of finding the evidence, I think, is likely to have addressed 40, maybe 50% of the actual issue, because you've aired the issue in front of all the key people, and then you've had a conversation. Everything else is zeroing in on it. It could be, as I said, the stakeholder could be taking part of that role away to deal with procedures, systems, and the like. But so you've opened this up. But I would say that the majority of this could be, you could have a working solution in the hands of the people who need it, either with regular workshops or conversations, 90-minute workshops on a particular topic, and digital resources that you would create in-house in just a few minutes, just to plug those gaps. And that's a few minutes with subject matter experts in your organization. I'd say in 3 to 4 weeks, you could have something in the hands of the people, everybody accountable for the work and making a meaningful difference. I would go so far as to say you wouldn't have even chosen a vendor in that time if you were doing it the traditional way.
Wow. What am I not asking you about this? What are the things that you're most excited about? What are the challenges that you see? As it sounds like it's a no-brainer. Why would you do it any other way? Like, what are the pieces that the roadblocks that you're coming up against when you either bring the collaborative solution to a client or, the 360 platform to a client? Like what's the pushback?
So the pushback is, what do I do with the stuff that I'm doing now? So, and my response is that what I've just described doesn't replace a great deal, apart from bad betting, and fumbling along and trying to make those same mistakes. Because if you're not talking about the work, you're not fixing the work. And if what you're doing is you're applying all of your money and energy into developing more learning, then you're creating more noise. So the way that I see this is that you don't ever want to be throwing away anything that works, right? How do you know it works? I always ask the question, how do you know it works? People attend, right? Don't break anything that people are consider significant to them. If your courses, your curricula run themselves because you've got good vendors, then you keep them as is. But at the same time, if you've got a presentation skills course that's very popular, but people are rubbish at presenting in your organization, you probably want to have a look at your presentation problem and look at it in a data and evidence-based manner, and then either pull it or leave it later down the line. And as far as online content's concerned, a lot of the time, there is an indicator there for you. If people aren't using it, it's not because they don't like online learning. It's not because they don't have time to learn, and it's not because they don't know how to learn. It's the clearest indicator that you've got a non-solution there that's fixing an L&D engineered problem, which is we don't have online content. Some of the biggest content houses, and we all know what they're called, will struggle for engagement. And I know, because I speak to a lot of L&D leaders who say, how do you get people to engage in vendor X? You go, well, if your people aren't, and you think the message is out there, your people are giving you a really clear indication that it's not a wholesale solution that's required. Don't get me wrong, there are some great content houses out there that you can subscribe to. But if you're struggling to get any meaningful engagement, like when I say meaningful, I mean 1% could be meaningful. But if it's not proliferated through your entire organization, it's probably not a company-wide solution. It's going to be very particular to people who are at certain stages within their career or their job role. So I'd say that the indicators you have should be listened to, but don't go pulling everything out. What you do, I mean, anybody who's made a pivot from providing learning to solving business problems does it one conversation at a time. They don't develop the learning culture. They don't get the CEO to get permission. They don't get the senior leadership to give the mandate down. They don't get more line managers engaged, and they don't get learners to change their expectations or their behaviors or to become more self-directed. They simply work on business problems, data, with requisite data and evidence, and then they solve it laser focused till you've got to such a point where your key stakeholders are saying, why don't we do it all like this? And you say humbly, that's a great idea, I wish I'd thought that. But you don't do it before. There's just no need. You've got to create the groundswell from each key stakeholder at a time, and you gain the currency and the credibility by actually solving the problems and being able to show that you have. And on my podcast, the Learning and Development podcast, I do speak with so many people who have done this, and not a single one tried to align the planets before they went ahead. They said they tried it once, it worked. They tried it again, but this time with a little bit more confidence. By the third, fourth, and fifth time, they're doing it better than they had before. And some of them completely automated the needs extraction process and got total transparency across the organization. So every time a request comes in for training, everyone sees, and then it's placed with the weighting required, what's going to add the greatest value to the organization. So their backlog is completely transparent. Everyone knows what they're working on, and they chew through 200 initiatives a year.
Wow, it's fantastic. I am never, I'm always surprised at how quickly 45 minutes goes by here. My final question for you, sir, even though it sounds like there's much more we can chew on here, is what are you most excited about in this particular proposition? Like what in the L&D universe, what's, as you look forward 6 months, 12 months from now, in the near future, what are you psyched about? what is it that, you want everyone to know about? Could be a shiny new object. It could be an organization. It could be a process. Is there anything that you want to put on the table that everyone should check out that you're particularly enamored with?
Oh wow, it's quite the question to nail down to one. So I'm always excited when I'm speaking to people who are actually at the sharp end of learning and development, those who are actually changing it from within organisations. So look, if I can plug my podcast, those are the people I talk to. They're making the difference. Nothing lights me up more than somebody who says, "Look, we decided we were going to make this change." And I was talking with a company just last week. Who did this pivot and have totally changed the expectation of what L&D can achieve in their organization, and they're going to be taking on a bigger part of the learning and development pie as a result. It is amazing what we can do in our function when we show that we are valuable, and we do that by making an actual difference. And so, look, whether it's on my podcast or this podcast or other great ones out there, listen to the people who are actually making this difference. And I think that's where we get excited.
Fantastic. David James, you are the Chief Learning Officer for 360 Learning. Thank you so much for taking time out today to speak with us. Clearly a topic everybody needs to pay attention to, but I thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you.